Hi, Elliot.
Hi, Danielle.
How's it going?
It's going pretty good.
So we have Cobi.Clark, our legislative director, here with us.
Oh, that's really exciting. This is our second time having him, right?
It is. We had Cobi before when we kind of introduced him as the new legislative director, and we talked about that long-term care insurance bill.
I gotta figure out how to opt out of that now that I think about it.
I don't know that I'll be able to because I don't work for employers that would have to deal with those taxes
Oh my
because
God.
I'm a 1099 employee.
What trash?
So I might never be able to opt out, it sounds like.
That's awful, dude.
Unless I get a job to opt out and then quit the job.
That sounds like a workaround to me.
That sounds like work.
When they ask you, like, why do you want this job, you could be like, actually, I fully intend to only use this job as an opt-out for the 1099. So what's the minimum amount of time I could break even with y'all? So that I could opt out. But
Yeah, because I need to make back the money that I have to pay for my private insurance to be able to opt out. And then once I've paid for that insurance plan, then I can quit.
exactly. It's a great system. It really works for everybody. So anyway, hi Kobe. How's it going?
Hi, Gobi.
Hi, everyone.
So we were talking about housing reform earlier. I think you sent me a couple articles on the moratorium on eviction, and then you sent me another one on these just cause evictions in the state.
Yeah. So it's an interesting time in housing right now, just in general. I think affordable housing is kind of a key Washington State issue that the Libertarian Legislative Department wants to take on and kind of help solve. We've got a major affordability crisis, particularly in our state. We've got one of the least affordable states in the nation, particularly in the greater Seattle area. And we've begun drafting a piece of legislation to help combat that issue. And then in addition to that, in addition to housing affordability, both from a rental perspective and from a homeownership perspective, we have an incredibly democratic state that to think that it's okay to tell people what they can and can't do with their property. So I think we've got a lot to offer, and we've got a lot of feedback that we can give the state to help hopefully alleviate some of the affordability crisis, and also hopefully help mom and pop landlords hold on to their property in spite of the state's continued effort to tell them it's not theirs.
This is such a weird spot because the CDC demanded that nobody is allowed to kick anybody out of their rental situation, which is odd, right? Firstly, and then secondly, there's a lot of renters who weren't able to pay their rent because the lockdowns literally made their jobs illegal, right? And so this means that a whole pile of people can't pay their rent, and so that's the alleged purpose for the moratorium to begin with, right? So it just seems like it's a huge mess that's caused by the government from top to bottom, and it's caused by the government in a sort of strange way that we're not used to thinking about it, right? Because the CDC usually doesn't decrease stuff like this, right? So could we unravel for a second, if you could, for us, Kobe, like, what from your perspective is going on here, right? Like,
Well, there's a number of different things. The eviction moratorium is one problem, but that's kind of a temporary problem that yes, you're right, caused by the state shutdowns, the federal shutdowns. And interestingly, the federal solution to shutting the economy down and telling landlords they can't kick people out, and then telling people that they can't have jobs to pay their rent, is to then use money that they don't have to pay the landlords for some percentage of the back rent that the tenants can pay for, which is just kind of mind-boggling to me. It's like, well, wait a second. So you're going to shut down production entirely, and then you're going to print dollars that aren't actually backed by any level of economic output and pump that into the economy to try and solve a problem you yourself created. And that it's like I don't understand the logic, but I don't work for the federal government. Maybe that's a good thing. But that's one issue. The other issue is the state in particular the farther left side of the Democratic Party, has kind of taken this pandemic as an opportunity to try and fight for more radical tenants' rights. And one of the key pieces of legislation that they've recently proposed, well, actually passed now, Jay Inslee signed it, is what's known as just cause protection. And just cause protections, in and of themselves, are not necessarily problematic. I mean, don't get me wrong, I am a landlord, but I also need to be respectful of my tenants, and they are people, and they deserve our respect and they deserve our consideration. That's, and they need some level of notices. If there's going to be, if somebody's going to reclaim their property, let's say a tenant's on a month-to-month lease, I don't dispute that tenant needs longer than 20 days notice to find a new place. And that's kind of the justification for just cause protection in general. And the old Landlord Tenant Act kind of did a good job of, notice requirements. But the new just cause provisions state that month-to-month leases are no longer month-to-month and can no longer be terminated on 90 days notice, but they're actually considered perpetual. And you can only kick your tenant out of your house if you have just cause to do so. And then the state lists a number of criteria that must be met in order for just cause to be founded, which effectively means that if you lease your property on a month-to-month basis, or if you don't have a term lease, or if you fail to provide notice on your term lease, you effectively lose your right to your property. Your tenants now have right to your property. And the only way you can bargain for new lease terms at that point is, well, you can't, because now the tenant's on the property. So you no longer have the ability to evict anybody. You have to have cause to do so. Now, go ahead.
No, it's crazy because I've got a friend actually who already lives in a state with that sort of, and it's sort of a red state too. It's a very strange situation where they would be happy to take on somebody and charge them lower than market value for renting to help somebody get off their feet, and it could potentially be a sort of alleviation of a homeless crisis or somebody who's about to be homeless situation. But that just cause provision is in their state, and so they're like, no, I'm not going to risk somebody coming in here and then breaking reasonable terms of my lease.
You hit the nail on the head.
One of the things that for them that would be important is like hard drugs. They'd be like, dude, if you pick up hard drugs, there's no way I'm not letting you in. But that is not a valid reason to kick somebody out of your house, according to this similar just cause thing in this other state. And so it's like, well, I'm not going to rent to anybody then.
Nailed
it hurts landlords, but it also
no, if you don't have the ability to reclaim the property that you own, if the people who are living there are doing something to your property that you don't like, you can no longer afford to rent to people who have a credit score that's less than 680. You can no longer afford to rent to people who are down on their luck and are between jobs and don't have 2 years of employment history. You can no longer afford to rent to anybody who maybe is at a 40 or 50% rental threshold, as opposed to the underwriting threshold of affordability at 30%. In fact, I have a friend of mine who also owns a piece of property who had a wonderful guy from out of town who was down on his luck out of state. The economy wasn't quite as hot there, who got a job in Seattle, and he wanted to move to Seattle. And his credit score is 520, and he didn't have a consistent job history. It's like, well, if there weren't these wacky job just cause protections, number one, and if there weren't these eviction moratoriums, he'd be happy to gamble on somebody like that. It's like, look, can you pay your rent? We're not gonna have any issues. But if you stop paying your rent and I can't kick you out and your credit's not good, well, I don't have any recourse. So no, I can't rent to you anymore. I can only rent to people who can afford it. And it's just a classic example of a well-intentioned piece of legislation ultimately negatively impacting the people who it's intended to benefit.
Elliot let me stay with him for a couple weeks a few months ago. What you're telling me is that I never had to move out?
Well, roommate agreements are a little bit different, but yeah, and generally you kind of have to have an agreement. But
Well, she was
what you're
never on a
talking, if there's no
lease.
agreement in writing, it's not a valid tenancy. But if you have a written agreement, let's say I have a term lease. So let's say I sign a lease with a tenant for a year. Under the new provisions, I have to give 60 days notice prior to the expiration of the term in order for that lease to actually expire and for me to be able to renegotiate the lease under new market conditions. Okay. Uh, if I don't do that, if I forget to send the notice, or any such thing like that, the lease automatically becomes month-to-month perpetual. And as soon as the lease becomes month-to-month perpetual, then you have to follow just cause, and you no longer have at-will rights to your property. So the only way to maintain your at-will rights to your property is to sign a term lease and provide 60 days notice prior to the end of the term that your term has expired. The way that I intend to accommodate that is by putting a provision at the bottom of all my leases that says signing this lease serves as your 60 days notice that at the end of this term, the lease will expire and you must find a new place to live. If you'd like to continue living at this residence, please contact me within 60 days of the expiration of the lease, and we can negotiate your new term. But if you don't do that, any other form of lease that you sign is perpetual.
No, I have friends who are like looking for places to live in Seattle just month to month, like for like a few months in the summer.
Yeah.
Do you
It's going to be.
think that this is going to make it more difficult to find that kind of housing
It
then?
would be almost impossible. Well, I can't say that. I can't predict the future. But if I were a landlord, and I am a landlord, I would no longer sign any leases for less than. It's always going to be a term lease, and it's always going to be a one-year term. There's no more flexibility whatsoever in shorter terms than that, because you give up the rights to your own property by agreeing to anything other than that.
Man, and I really hate term leases. Like, the only thing I like about a year lease is that it's cheaper, but in general, I don't know, I don't like it.
I love them. I like the stability of knowing where I'm going to be for the next 12 months. Like, that feels great to me. Month to month sounds real scary. So I get why people want this notice, but like, that's the point of month to month.
Right. So anyway, that's one particular issue related specifically to rentals, and I'm actually probably going to have to modify the legislation we were drafting up in relation to affordable housing, because this wasn't an issue when we started working on it 3 or 4 months ago. This is a hastily passed piece of legislation in the state legislature that I know will be addressed. But so that's one thing that's just exacerbating an already problematic issue. There's a number of other key issues that make affordable housing, particularly newer affordable housing in the state, totally unattainable. And I guess I could start going into each of those unless you guys had other comments you wanted to review on that first.
No, go for it.
Sure. So the key goal of this piece of legislation that we're working on is to increase the supply of affordable housing. And the way that it does that is a couple of different ways. The first way is that it provides a sales tax waiver for housing projects that provide affordable housing. And we've defined affordable housing as rent that does not cost more than 30% of the gross income of median income in the area. So in other words, if the city of Seattle has a median income of $55,000 a year, divide by 12, multiply by 0.3, and you get the rental threshold to be considered an affordable house or an affordable apartment. And we would propose waiving state sales taxes for buildings that meet that criteria. And so that you guys know, not everyone does, if you construct new projects, let's say for the sake of discussion, a $16 million 80-unit apartment building like one that I'm building in Tacoma right now, you have to pay sales tax on it. And sales tax is, well, more than 10%. So on a $16 million apartment building, sales tax is $1.6 million. Well, who do you think pays for that $1.6 million? The renters have to pay for that $1.6 million. It gets amortized over 30 years in the form of a permanent financing. But that permanent financing forces you to charge more in rent, to whatever the amortization rate is at 5% on $1.6 million. I think it's like $100 a month or something like that more. Just the residents of these apartment buildings are paying just in state sales tax. Now, most real estate transactions are subject to excise tax. So if you sell your house, you pay like 1.5% excise tax. But if you build a house, you pay 10.1% sales tax. And then if you sell it, you pay another 1.5% excise. So,
Let me clarify, Kobe.
Sure.
If we're building a house,
Yep.
we are paying sales tax on the house,
Yeah.
not sales tax on the materials we're purchasing to make the house, or both?
Well, so if you hire a general contractor to build your house for you, you are going to pay that general contractor sales tax. Now, that general contractor is then going to go procure all the materials necessary to put the house together and all the labor necessary to put the house together. So the general contractor does not pay sales tax on those materials. You pay sales tax to the general contractor.
Okay.
I get it. I prefer sales tax to income tax, of course. I think most libertarians would. I can't speak for everyone, but if I had to choose a tax, I would choose sales tax over income tax, although no tax is better. But,
Obviously.
the state has to pay for the roads and some level of infrastructure. And, I get it. A sales tax is not the most reasonable way to do that. But, a sales tax is supposed to be on incidentals. We don't charge sales tax on food because food is necessary. So why are we charging sales tax on housing? Housing is necessary. We shouldn't, and we don't. The only place we charge sales tax on housing is when somebody's building it, which makes it impossible to build new units that people can afford. That's why all the affordable housing projects are like built in the 70s. So that's.
Oh yeah, they're the old crappy buildings.
Exactly, they're the old
that
crappy
no one
buildings.
else wants to renovate.
Yes, and as soon as you try and renovate it, well, now you're back to paying sales tax on it. So,
oh my gosh. Okay.
One opportunity to stimulate affordable housing production, I think, is to waive sales tax if the project is going to be for affordable use. If it's a market rate project, I'm willing to compromise. But the reality is somebody making $55,000 a year can't afford to pay the amortized cost of the sales tax. And if they can't afford to pay the amortized cost of the sales tax, nobody builds it. And lo and behold, nobody can build affordable housing. So that's one problem. The next problem is state energy. And, I understand that the environment's important and we need to protect the environment. But again, the guy who's making minimum wage trying to feed his kids can't afford to pay $5,000 more for a mini split that's more efficient than a $500 cadet heater. So why are we making poor people pay to carry the burden of energy efficiency when we should really be trying to figure out more energy efficient solutions of producing electricity rather than conserving it? It's like we're forcing the burden of energy conservation on poor people instead of expecting the market to innovate and produce more efficient electricity. So I would suggest state waive energy code requirements for affordable, which would allow developers to build quality safe housing that's still warm, just not as energy efficient, consumes more electricity. But it's
any idea what the difference is between them paying more for those utilities that are not cost effective because they're not eco-friendly, as opposed to paying the more expensive, less eco-friendly but cheaper to install things?
And unfortunately, it depends on interest rates. And the reason that it depends on interest rates is because let's say for the sake of discussion, I'm building an 80-unit apartment building. And in each one of those apartments, I have to put in a $6,000 mini split system instead of a $500 cadet heater. Well, what's going to happen is that $6,000 mini split system is going to get financed with a bank when somebody purchases a property and starts leasing it to people. And if it gets financed with a bank at, say, I don't know, a 2% interest rate, well, then the cost of that mini split is going to be less than if it was financed with a bank at like 6%, right? So unfortunately, it's a moving target. So if you look at the cost of energy relative to the cost of the debt service and the principal payment on that mini split, it's going to change depending on the cost of your energy and on the cost of your money and on the cost of the mini split. And so it's somewhat difficult to directly compare the cost of electricity to the cost of that mini split because it's always changing, number one. And number two, if we would alleviate restrictions and allow people to build more efficient, cost-efficient energy sources, such as nuclear, for example, perhaps the cost of the energy would be less, and interest rates are a moving target, so you can't really also identify a mini split. But I will say, in today's market, in today's interest rate, and in the Seattle market, paying Seattle City Light for power, it is way less expensive to pay for energy than it is to pay for energy efficiency. And it's like, I mean, it's like 20% of a building cost in an affordable project is nothing but the new energy code. And that translates to a much greater savings in rent than the extra expense per unit in energy usage. And I can prove that with a model, but I can't do that here. Maybe I'll make a separate video about it sometime. So like and subscribe, and I can share with you my model and my case study on that particular issue.
Yeah, look at this guy, Kobe.
Oh, so pro. I love it.
Oh, and I guess I still have to follow.
Yeah, I'll be really interested in seeing that model because all these numbers and percentages, they sort of make sense because I was gonna buy a house, but I wasn't really considering the cost effectiveness of more efficient energy things. So
yeah,
this has been interesting.
Yeah, it's definitely a moving target, and I can show you the letter. And I guess I should also follow that up with my background. I own a real estate firm. I also am a partner, and I own a construction company. And we build about $40 million a year worth of a combination of housing in market rate housing and senior living housing. So I'm intimately familiar with energy code and zoning regulations and the market in general, because we also buy and sell property. So I'm uniquely situated to hopefully help the state make things a little easier on us, and then allow us to make things a little easier on renters.
Yeah, and you said that we're writing a piece of legislation as the Libertarian Party of Washington State, correct? That's something you're working on?
That's right. Yep. We draft preliminary proposals, letters of intent identifying precisely what it is we want to do, and then we work internally within the department and the party to agree to it. And then ultimately, we're going to send that to an attorney to draft a formal bill that we can then take to the state legislator and lobby with it, and also hand it to our future candidates who want to run for office themselves. We can give them a platform to work on. So if you're an individual and you want to run for office and you like what the Libertarian Party has to offer, but you don't know how to write your own legislation, or you don't know what you want your platform to be, we help build your platform for you. And if affordable housing is an issue that's close to you and your community, we have a solution for it. So anyway, those are two key opportunities, I think, to help developers build more apartment buildings. Now, of course, there's a whole nother thing that we could talk about, and that's zoning. And that's probably a whole nother half-hour video in and of itself. And it's also kind of challenging because zoning is heavily driven by local jurisdictions and less so by the state. From a state perspective, I don't have a whole lot of ability to fix that, other than Biden's method, which seems to be pay people to fix that. But he's paying people with tax dollars, so that doesn't really work for us.
No, of course. And libertarians don't have enough money as an organization to be able to pay people to do much of anything, including us.
Right.
But anyway, point being is that, so let me ask you this. As far as a strategy thing, you are legislative director for Washington. So like what is your strategy or tactic to make some motion on some of these items, or is it just to kind of get the word out there, or to propose a counteroffer? Like, what are you planning on doing about this?
Sure. No, it's a wonderful question. So the first thing we got to do is we got to get the word out there and hopefully build our membership, because the more members we have, the easier it is for me to lobby a legislator, right? Because I can tell a legislator, look, I represent the Libertarian Party. We've drafted this bill. We've got X number of supporters, and we'd like you to sponsor this legislation. So if you like what we have to say and you like the proposals that we're rolling out, maybe we can provide a link in the description to the letter of intent for this particular bill. Then
Absolutely.
I highly recommend that you sign up as a member for the Libertarian Party. It's like $25 a year, and it adds so much clout to our ability to bring these bills to the state legislature. Then the next challenge, of course, is there's attorney's fees related to taking these letters of intent, making them legal, and that also requires some level of support. The more members we have, the more money we have, and the more money we have, the more bills we can write, and so on and so forth. So that's kind of part A. Part B is finding people who want to run for office on our platform. And the more people we have running for office on our platform, and the more people who are interested in these bills and are willing to take these bills to the state legislature, then we don't have to rely so much on other parties' candidates and lobbying other parties' candidates. We can hand our own people those bills. So that's kind of part B. But we don't have that many candidates just yet. So we got to start small, and starting small means joining up and giving us more numbers.
Yeah, and I think having this foundation too, just for new folks to the party and also folks interested in running for office, it really does make sense for us to kind of have a few things that they can pick from to really be their babies, especially, because we all kind of come from different backgrounds and know what's going on in this state in different ways. And so, yeah, this is great to be able to collaborate.
This is awesome because you got to arm up your candidates with something. And our philosophy is awesome, very general. There's a lot of general prescriptions we have, but it would be nice to be able to, as a candidate, go out there and say, no, I have 10 specific legislative actions that I could take at the state or local level to actually affect change in realistic ways and do liberty. So this is really, really exciting to me anyway.
Yeah, that's fantastic. No, that's exactly the goal. It's like, I totally agree with you. Like, you can point to something tangible that's going to tangibly benefit, everyday people who live in the state. And if we can help translate our philosophy to that, then I think we can really be successful.
Yeah, I agree.
There's
Did
never
you?
been a better time to join the party. Join the party.
Yeah. Also like and subscribe. And then I guess, Kobe, we're going to be putting this out probably on the all new legislative playlist section of the LP Washington channel.
Yes. Yeah. On the LP Washington channel, I think we've got 8 bills right now that we're cooking in the legislative department. And I'd really like to be able to get those bills out into the public and get people talking about them and interested about them, and see if we can't use those to help drive membership. So, we talked a little bit about my first one, which is affordable housing. The next one we have is healthcare, and then on down the list. I think you talked with David Wiley last week about some of his family law ideas.
His was alternative
And
taxes
making things
when
a
I
little
talked
bit.
to him.
Oh, alternative.
Family
Oh,
law
okay,
is
my mistake.
next.
But he also has family laws next. Yeah. So we've got, a great collaborative group there, and we've got a lot of ideas that we want to get out. So we'll be rolling those out periodically on the YouTube channel for people to view and appreciate. And then we'll also probably include links to the actual document so they can read it and formulate their own opinions, and then also offer us their feedback if they're members. If you want to offer your feedback, and if you want to make changes to these bills that you think are valuable, you got to be a member. So sign up.
And if you are a member and you want to participate in these legislative discussions, we have our Libertarian Party of Washington State Discord where a lot of these conversations happen. So most of us are on there every day kind of chatting about different issues. So there's kind of always something to discuss, whether it's legislation or just in the friendly debate. But we are always actively working on liberty issues there. So That's why we're here, to tell everyone about it.
Yeah, we're excited. We've got a lot of energy and a lot of growth potential.
Yeah. Anything else you wanted to add before we let you go?
I think that's it. I got to jump on to another meeting. So thanks for your time and thanks for having me.
Thank you, Kobe.
Awesome. Thank you, Kobe.
Yeah, have a good one.
Talk to you soon.
All right, bye.
Bye.
Don't forget to like and subscribe.
And join us at lby.org.
Sign up as a member for Libertarian. Like $25 a year.